Hi, everybody. Sorry about the delay there. That is CMAC's fault because I just saw in the chat that you said you updated your question, so I wanted to make sure I had the most recent version pasted into my script. So that is completely CMAC's fault. But technically, the stream was live. I just had not actually come on yet. Um, but yeah, thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the show. As usual, I will be responding to questions from my wonderful Patreon patrons and channel members first. So if you are joining me in the live chat and you have a question for me in the live chat or something, like you want to donate a super chat that I would love to acknowledge or just something that you want me to talk about, thank you, Dana. I will, and I already did. Um, please hold on to those until I get through the patron and member questions, and then I will spend the rest of the show hanging out with everybody in the live chat. So, having said that, the preliminaries now having been concluded, let's turn to my patron and member questions. And the first one is from Madeline, who says, okay, so I've been on a big B5 kick lately. So, Sinclair or Sheridan? This is actually a very easy question for me. It's obviously Sheridan. I have no particular love for Sinclair as a character. I did watch when I rewatched Babylon 5 just recently, and it's been several months now, but this year I went back and I watched the whole show from beginning to end on HBO Max for the first time since it originally aired. And I liked Sinclair and I liked the Sinclair episodes better than I remember liking them back in the 90s when it was originally on. And I thought Michael O'Hare's performance was better than I thought it was at the time. But even with that slight reevaluation, I think Sheridan is just a way more interesting character. And I think Bruce Boxleitner is light years more interesting as an actor. And all due respect to Michael O'Hare, who died and who had some very serious mental health difficulties to deal with. And I don't mean to disrespect him in any way, because from everything I've heard was he was a good guy, but I just think Bruce Boxleitner is a way better actor than he was, and gave a much more dramatic and compelling performance when he stepped in season 2 and took over. And the show drastically improves in season 2 when he steps in. And it's not just him. I mean, the show in general, I think, sort of started to find its legs and just became a better show across the board. But trading up in terms of the lead protagonist from Sinclair to Sheridan and from O'Hare to Boxleitner, I think was a big part of that. So I'm definitely a Sheridan guy. Kier, who will one day learn to form coherent sentences. I've been watching Foundation, and part of the story, like Dune, is a post-AI society. I started thinking about further future sci-fi. There's Star Wars with its slave race of robots that are useful but can't exceed human levels of sentience. There's Star Trek with limited but growing technology, with tools becoming sentient and having offspring. There's the generic Terminator robots. As soon as they stop having to take orders, they kill everyone. Any increasingly advancing technology will eventually overcome its limitations. So the question is, do we not build data because there's a chance of lore? Is there an inevitable robot uprising because of the inherent laziness of people? Keep up the work, good and otherwise. I mean, never bet against the inherent laziness of people or or the or just overall the inherent shittiness of people, the inherent capacity of people to fuck up whatever we're doing. We are capable of tremendous wonders. We are a species of just unlimited potential, but we are also the kind of people that if it's possible for us to fuck something up, you better believe we'll find a way to fuck it up. So, I mean, should we not build data because there's a chance of lore? I personally don't think that is enough of a reason not to do it. I don't think that's enough of a reason not to pursue technological advancement and to pursue artificial intelligence. I would really like to believe that after telling ourselves the story over and over and over and over again for generations about the dangers of artificial intelligence, about the dangers of either creating an artificial intelligence that is powerful enough to destroy you, or creating an artificial intelligence and mistreating it and marginalizing it and giving it a reason to not like you. But but as I said, with humanity, you never know. And well, actually, you do know. You know that we're going to screw it up. So yeah, I think it may be inevitable. But let's go for it. Let's just see what happens. Um, Next question is from Isaiah Taylor. Trigger warning: this contains sexual harassment issues. Steve, can I ask for some advice as a man? So on Saturday, I meet a girl that unfriended me and stopped talking to me because I was coming on too close to her. She had a boyfriend and she said I was becoming obsessed with her. I tried to apologize to her, but I wanted to respect her boundaries. To be honest, I've never had relationships with women due in part to my autism and the fact that my dad not thinking I understood women. Therefore, he never taught me about relationships. I think I would develop these obsessions because I would feel lonely and depressed. I've lost lots of female friends this way. I also struggle with porn and an OnlyFans addiction. I'm trying to fix my sex addiction, but I've definitely gotten better with respecting female boundaries today from my past. Can you offer me any advice? I'm willing to be chastised by the audience too. Thanks for the help, and I'm sorry for my transgressions. Well, I appreciate that, and I think that's a good attitude to have. I mean, of course, you know, being sorry is just the first step. You can be sorry, and I think that's good and that's necessary, but the being sorry, the regret has to lead to a change in behavior. Um, you know, uh, which I think you're aware of, and I think you're probably, you're not. It seems like you are aware of the need for improvement here and for change here. So I mean, as far as offering you advice, given that you know that you have these issues, and I'm not talking about, I mean, the porn addiction, that's, you said you're handling that. If that is something that you feel has gotten out of control with you and you need to deal with it and you're trying to deal with it, then let's just leave that aside. I'll take your word for it that you're aware of that and you're dealing with that. But this issue that you seem aware of, that it stood in your way of having relationships, or even non-romantic relationships, friendships with women, because you have difficulty respecting boundaries. You mentioned some of it might be due to the fact that you have autism. Perhaps maybe you have difficulty recognizing boundaries or understanding when a boundary has been set, if it's set through like a social cue or a nonverbal thing. Um, if this is an issue that you are aware of, then it might be worth it to make potential and tell them, look, sometimes I don't always read social cues very well. Sometimes you may want to have some distance between us, and I don't, and I'm not picking up on that cue. So, you might need to remind me, or you might need to, say it plainly to to put that out there. So but yeah, I mean, I wish I could give you better advice. But I'm not sure what else I can tell you. Just you seem aware of the problem. You seem aware that there is an issue there, and making your limitations more apparent to people so that they know that they might need to meet you halfway. It might be a good idea. But other than that, just the fact that you seem to recognize that you have an issue there is probably the most important thing. Um, Next one is from General Contact Unit Problem Child. Number one. Okay. Multiple questions. In 1987, before the War on Terror, my favorite author, Ian Banks, wrote a sci fi novel where the antagonist aliens are somewhat coded Islamic. Banks was a socialist and protested the Iraq War, but after 2001, that book acquired a lot of right wing fans. What would you do if you were an author in a situation like that? Like, imagine you wrote a sci fi novel where the bad guys have some Japanese coded, then years after it's published, anti Japanese sentiment massively upticks, and suddenly your book has a lot of right wing racist fans. What would you do? Number two, what do you think goes on in the minds of people who are selfless in their personal lives but then vote conservative? Like, I know people who would volunteer to spend all night looking for a lost child in the woods, but will happily support parties that want to let children die crossing borders because we're not obligated to give people handouts. You told Dana such people aren't good, they're just polite, but I think that's a cop-out explanation. Well, as far as the first one, if I were an author and one of my books became sort of co-opted by a right-wing group or a racist group, I would try to speak out as much as I can, to make it clear that my stance as the author is different from that, and that, you know, people can be fans of whatever they want, people can read whatever books they want and like it or dislike it or interpret it whatever way they want, but that I, as the creator, do not desire them as fans and do not want to welcome them into my works fandom to the extent that I have influence over. You know, if I created something and it turned out a bunch of, like you said, anti-Japanese sentiment, or, you know, if I wrote something or created something and there were, you know, a bunch of like neo-Nazis all of a sudden decided that they loved it. I mean, first of all, I would really take a good hard look at myself and what I created and try to figure out what it was that they were attracted to. Make sure it wasn't me, or that there wasn't a change I had to make. But then secondly, make sure that they knew that I didn't desire their fandom, you know, that I didn't like them, I didn't want them, I didn't approve of them. They are not my people. I stand against them. I consider myself their enemy, you know. And honestly, like, as for number two, I am not terribly interested in that. Like, I don't know what goes through their minds. I don't know how to reach them. I don't care. Like, I am so completely done with trying to understand people who seem to be good people, but then vote for candidates that, you know, if their policies were implemented would result in death and destruction and dehumanization. I'm just done. Like, I don't care. I don't care. Maybe you find that to be an interesting conundrum. You know, what let's try to unlock the puzzle of these, you know, these conservative voters who, as you said, you know, would spend all night looking for a lost child in the woods, but don't care about children who die crossing borders. I don't care. I don't care. Like, life's too short. I'm tired of treating them like a puzzle box that needs to be solved. Tired of treating them like some kind of cosmic mystery. Fuck them. They make the world a shittier place. They make the world a shittier place for everybody. And if you think that that's a cop out to say, you know, like I said to Dana a little while ago, that they're not good, they're just polite. If you think that's a cop out, I can live with that. Like, I'm okay with you thinking that. I'm completely my level of interest in those people and trying to understand them and trying to explain what goes on in their heads and why they act the way they do and why they vote the way they do. You know, I do not care. I just want to outvote them so that they can stop making policy that affects other people. I'm not trying to win them to my side. I don't think we need them. Fuck them. Next question is from Stephen G. Clenard. Sorry, this is a few weeks late, but vexed is vexed. Steve, You're a DC Comics guy. This, by the way, this is my favorite gimmick currently being run of any of the regular questioners. Uh, Maybe you can help me with some questions that have been vexing me for some time. Does the Batman villain Scarecrow enjoy Halloween, seeing it as a celebration of the frightening? Or does he disdain the holiday, feeling that it trivializes fear and is over commercialized? Is his signature fear toxin less effective during the spooky season as people are expecting to be scared and likely to laugh it off as a gag? Speaking of which, do you think this would make a good premise for a villain? Unconvincing bedsheet over the head ghost lad. Perhaps the lamest and laziest member of the trick-or-treat gang, see previous Ask Away. This misbehaved moppet just cut some holes in a bedsheet, threw it over his head, and declared, "I'm a ghost." Worse yet, he uses an unlaundered New Orleans Pelicans fitted bedsheet. Thoughts? As always, I think it's a brilliant premise. I endorse it 100%. No additions, no notes. And yeah, I think Scarecrow hates Halloween. I think Scarecrow feels about Halloween the way that like really uptight conservative Christians feel about the commercialization of Christmas. You know, the way or how they feel about like the secular side of Christmas, like Santa Claus and that kind of thing. I think Scarecrow probably views Halloween in that way. Um um Yeah, I think that's probably how Scarecrow views Halloween. He has kind of like a, well, this isn't really scary. And also, like, I mean, like what Scarecrow does, his fear toxin and his fear based crimes, like they really like you're deeply afraid. Like it's like mortal terror from the inside out. Like you are just you're experiencing kind of like phobic fear, right? It's not just like Halloween type fear, like, oh, you scared me. Like it's really, really like serious existential dread. So, I think he just, he doesn't appreciate it. He feels like it trivializes his whole jam. I mean, his whole deal is making people afraid. And here's Halloween where you're supposed to be afraid for fun. Scarecrow wouldn't think that being afraid was fun, you know? Like he'd be pissed off at that. He wouldn't like that at all. He'd be offended by it. He'd be affronted by it. So yeah, I think that's how it would go. But unconvincing bedsheet over the head ghost lad is fantastic. That is better than some of those last minute Halloween costumes that Adam Sandler proposed on Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live many years ago. Agent Meister, Peldor Joy, Steve, have you ever heard of the comic book character Judge Dredd? He is a future lawman in a city where crime is rampant and is part of a system that has the power to act as cop, jury, and executioner if necessary. He first appeared in the weekly British sci-fi anthology comic 2000 AD in March 1977 and has appeared in all but a handful of issues since. His stories have been diverse. Most of the time, Dredd is the hero, but at times he's the villain. His stories can range from drama, comedy, action, satire, and major several month long sagas that would rival many of the events in American comics in quality. 2 movies have been made based on the character, one starring Karl Urban, which was popular, and one starring Stallone, which was not, but I like it. If you're interested in dipping your toe into a new franchise, then you could do a lot worse than Judge Dredd and his world. Also, are you from outer space or are you just from Maryland and you only work in outer space? I like that. I am familiar with Judge Dredd. Actually, I saw the Stallone movie. I still have not seen the Karl Urban version from several years ago, but I hear that's really good. So I expect if I ever get around to watching it, that I'll enjoy it because the reviews it got were really good, and I really like Karl Urban and pretty much everything. But I first became familiar with Judge Dredd because I have been pretty much a lifelong Batman fan, and in the '90s I think there were two. Maybe there was only one. There was one or two. I'm remembering. I can't remember specifically, but there were crossovers between Batman and Judge Dredd. There were like team up comics that were published where Batman met Judge Dredd and they had like an adventure together. And I don't remember anything specific about the story of those crossovers, but I remember liking them, and I remember liking the artwork and thinking they were good stories and thinking Judge Dredd was an interesting character. So I have known of the existence of Judge Dredd since back, I think, before the first movie. But I'm not super familiar with the character. So I mean, it's possible that I might jump into the world of Dredd at some point. I don't know if I will or not, but I am familiar with Judge Dredd. I know that he is a character that exists, and he has at least teamed up with Batman a few times. So there you go. But thank you for the suggestion. I really appreciate it. And yes, and I love the Star Trek 4 reference there. You're from outer space. No, I'm from Iowa. I only work in outer space. I like that. Good movie. Keith Hale says, I would like to hear your response to the following sentiment I got from a comedy podcast. I'm paraphrasing it slightly. We're never going to forgive them for killing our pawpaws and mamaws. They are never going to forgive us for being right about this. It is bleak, but I think tragically accurate. I assume this is talking about the pandemic and the people who have prolonged the pandemic and refused to wear masks and refused to get vaccinated and that stuff. You know, we won't forgive them for killing our grandparents. They won't forgive us for being right about this. I agree with you and with the sentiment. I do think it's tragically accurate. And again, as with the second half of the question from earlier from General Contact Unit Problem Child, it's honestly not something that I really lose a lot of sleep over. You know, if they are never going to forgive me or people like me, people from my generation and younger generations for being right about this, fine. Like I'm done losing sleep over it. Not that I ever lost sleep over it before, but you know, I'm done worrying about this and spending time on this. Life's too fucking short to spend so much time of it worrying about the feelings and the thoughts and whether or not we get the forgiveness of fucking shitty, irresponsible people who are getting other people killed and making the world a shittier place. But yeah, I agree with you. Yes, it is bleak. It's very bleak. But it's but accurate. Yes. Shad. Long ago and far away, about 25 years and 800 miles, I was told that when I raised one eyebrow, it resembled when Spock would raise an eyebrow. And when I raised my other eyebrow, it looked like when Dr. McCoy would raise an eyebrow. Thinking of this recently made me wonder what would have happened if the two of them had been merged in a transporter accident like the one that created Tuvix. I'm not sure what you would call them, certainly not either Spacoy or Dr. McCock. Oh, would Captain Kirk have killed them? Could they have lived long enough for Janeway to do it? What is wrong with McCock? I think that's fantastic. I don't think you could call them Spookoy because the pronunciation of that runs dangerously close to a racial slur. But maybe put an O in there and make it Spockoy. I feel like that you might be able to get away with that. No, Kirk would not have killed them. If Spock and Dr. McCoy had been merged into McCock, or if I could reference a Silver Age Superman comic and refer to them as the composite Spock, I do not think that Captain Kirk would have killed the composite Spock in order to bring back Spock and McCoy. I think Kirk would have done what Captain Janeway failed to do and recognize that composite Spock was a unique individual in his own right, even though he was blended from the material of Kirk's great friends, Spock and McCoy. He had become his own unique individual, and to kill this individual who has done nothing wrong in order to bring back these two people who are gone now, Kirk would view that, I think, as unethical and would refuse to do that. So I do not think Kirk would have killed them, but because they would be half Vulcan, it is entirely possible that they would have lived long enough to reach the late 24th century, at which point Captain Janeway would totally have killed them. Yes. Glenn Helwig says, hey, Steve, I've watched your videos for almost 3 years. Before the pandemic, you and I differed politically. I voted for Trump in 2016. And for the first couple of years, not that I agreed with everything he did, I thought he did some good things. Then the pandemic hit and Trump suddenly changed, at least in my eyes. He became totally insane, for lack of a better word. Maybe I chose not to see that. Maybe he was that way all along, because in 2016, there was no way I would have voted for Hillary. Intelligence allows for a change. So I'm not saying I agree with everything you have said about politics, but I agree more with you now. That being said, I consider myself an independent. I vote for those that I think will do the best job and who follow along more closely with what I believe in. I was so disillusioned, I didn't even vote for president in 2020 just because I wasn't too sure about Biden either. What is your opinion of my change of heart? Sorry, this was so long. Well, I mean, my opinion of your change of heart is, I guess, better late than never. But I feel like, from my perspective, you still have some ways to travel. I mean, you say maybe maybe Trump was that way all along and you just chose not to see it. That is certainly what I would say. I do not think he changed at all when the pandemic hit. I think perhaps what may have happened in your case, and I don't mean to speak for you, I don't want to be too presumptuous, but I think what may have happened in your case is not that Trump changed, because I don't think Trump changed at all. I don't think Trump is capable of change. Um, I think the pandemic may have simply revealed to you who Trump had been all along, which is a reckless, incompetent, ignorant person who's manifestly unqualified for the position he had been elevated to. I think the pandemic certainly demonstrated that. I found it glaringly obvious before that, but the pandemic certainly demonstrated it. So perhaps for folks like you who had not realized it up to that point, the pandemic was the thing that showed it to you in such bright, vivid detail that you just couldn't miss it after that point. Maybe that is what happened. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm glad you got to that point. I don't really have much patience or understanding for people who said, well, there's no way I was going to vote for Hillary. Hillary wasn't that bad, especially when the alternative was Donald Trump. Like, I am not sympathetic to but I would have had to vote for Hillary. Yeah, and that's what you should have done. Uh, but, but yes, I'm glad that you have had this change of heart. I'm glad that you have recognized Trump for what he was. I think that's terrific. So I mean, my opinion of your change of heart is it took a little while. And I still don't think it has been, as much of a change as certainly as I would like to see, but good for you. And thank you for sharing, and thank you for being a supporter. Joe McClory. I have been having a hard time at work lately, with 3 to 4 mandatory overtime shifts per week for months now and no real end in sight. It is harder to stay caring and professional. To make matters worse, patients and in some cases coworkers have been downplaying or even calling COVID-19 a scam. And having had it and seeing my dad die of it, it is sometimes hard to not just scream at work about how wrong they are. This is mostly a chance to vent a bit, but I would like any advice you might have for keeping your cool while people are wrong in a way that personally infuriates you. I mean, if at all possible, walk away. Like, find, if that's an option, just step back, take 10 seconds, calm down, decide whether or not it's worth getting fired over to fucking light into this person. If you do decide to engage with them, maybe you could use your personal experience. If that's something you're comfortable doing, maybe you could say, if COVID is not you mentioned the fact that your dad died of COVID. Say if COVID's really not that dangerous, well, my dad died of COVID. So what should I say to my mom? What should I say to the people who loved my father who died of COVID? What would you say? What would you say as someone who doesn't think that it's that big of a deal? What would you say about the disease that killed him? Would you say that it wasn't that dangerous, that it wasn't that big of a deal, that we shouldn't be taking precautions, that we're overreacting? What about the hundreds of thousands of other people in this country who have died from this disease? What would you say to them? Would you say that it's not that big of a deal? You know, that's if you want to engage. If you don't want to engage, and like I say, I mean, I certainly would understand that, and I am at a point where from my perspective, where I am just you know beyond the need to engage with people like this unless I absolutely have to. So if you can make a break and walk away to avoid taking somebody's head off, I would say do that. But if you do feel like you need to or want to engage with them, force them to account for their bullshit opinion. What do they say to the dead? What of the dead? What of the dead? Do you still say that it's not that big of a deal? That it's a scam? That we're overreacting? What about all these dead people and their families and their friends and the people that love them who are left to go on without them because of this disease that you think isn't a big fucking deal, you piece of shit. You might not want to say the piece of shit part, or maybe you will. I don't know. Matthew Lordy says, "Hey, Steve, I was wondering if you watch or are subscribed to the following YouTubers: Renegade Cut, Kay and Skittles, Adam Something, More Than Bikes, and Lindsay Ellis. Would you also have suggestions for other left tubers? I'm aware of H-Bomber Guy, ContraPoints, and Sean. Thank you so much for making YouTube a slightly less shitty place to be. The website has so many reactionary and performatory content creators looking to profit from others' hate and narrow view of the world." Boy, isn't that is definitely true. I am familiar with Renegade Cut and Lindsay, and I subscribe to Lindsay and watch her videos occasionally, although I don't watch every single video she puts out, but I make an effort to watch her occasionally. And of course I'm aware of H-Bomb and Contra and Sean, and I try to watch their new stuff if it comes out, and if I have time. Cat Black is great. The One Janitor is great. And of course, my friend and fellow Star Trek YouTuber, Jesse Gender, who also does videos on other sort of non-Star Trek stuff and non-fandom, non-like nerdy stuff. Like, she also occasionally talks about social issues and stuff like that. So I would recommend her. But yeah, other than that, not really. I mean, there are probably some that, I mean, there are like Christy Winters is great. Kevin Logan is great. I don't know if they would necessarily qualify as part of quote unquote left tube, but they're terrific. She doesn't often talk about like political issues, at least not in such a direct way. But my friend Dana, who is probably in the chat right now, I'm not looking at the chat, but Dana, who co-hosts live streams with me on this channel and has her own YouTube channel, youtube.com/Dana Cole Dares. She occasionally talks about social issues or talks about being a teacher and having to deal with things, from a teacher's perspective. And, politically, she is certainly to the left, and she's wonderful when she talks about political issues. And she's just a little teeny tiny YouTuber. So if you subscribe to her and listen to her or watch her videos and leave her comments, which she craves, that would be terrific. But, I mean, I don't really watch a whole lot of YouTube. Like, I'm sure there are big time leftist YouTubers or progressive YouTubers, whether they would qualify as leftist or not, that I'm not familiar with. Like, I mean, I literally have never heard of Kay and Skittles, Adam Something, or More Than Bikes. I've heard of Renegade Cut, but I've only watched a handful of their videos. So, I mean, I am just not that engaged with it. So I'm not necessarily the best person to ask, but those are some suggestions, all just, of what little frame of reference I have. Next question is from John Burns. Hydrate. Okay. I'm hydrated. I have what I think is a complex question. Of course you do. The oceans are rising, right? Fish are an important edible resource. I know no one likes billionaires, but there are plans to build more in orbit around our planet, and billionaires are part of these plans. I was wondering, might it be feasible to grow fish in orbit around the Earth? If there's no environment with which to despoil, would this lessen the environmental risks by farming in space? If rising oceans are a problem, moving lots of seawater off the ground is good, right? Lowering sea levels would help, right? We could do this on the moon, but couldn't we try it in space with a module attached to a space station or a starbase or a spaceport? And we're going to Alpha Centauri, right? Even if it is to confirm that there really isn't anywhere we would want to live on there, we're going. So why not look at what else could work? Sending a community up instead of a few individuals would help all with adjusting to this habitat. So, I mean, I guess we're going to Alpha Centauri at some point in the future. Hypothetically, there are no currently planned missions to Alpha Centauri that I am aware of. Certainly, no human crewed missions to Alpha Centauri. But presumably, if we ever reach the point where we are able to travel outside of our solar system, Alpha Centauri would be a reasonable destination because it is the next closest star system. It is feasible to grow food in zero gravity. It is feasible to grow food in space. There have been experiments done about this for decades on the space shuttle and on the space station. Well, we've done a lot of the research to prove that it is possible. I would not want to involve billionaires. I would not want it to be a private enterprise because then it would almost certainly be a for-profit enterprise. And I think if we're going to create some kind of massive project to grow food in outer space, it should be a public works project. It should be publicly funded, government funded. It should be here in the United States. We would say we would want it to be a NASA project, and it would be done presumably in conjunction with the national space agencies of other countries, much like the space station is. And we would do it for the people, not for a private corporation, not for Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, or excuse me, Jeff Bezos, or anybody else. It would be for the common good. And if we're doing it that way, and we view it as a public works project that is done, for all humanity, then I think it would be a really interesting idea and possibly a really beneficial idea. But if it's like a billionaires thing where it's like, SpaceX wanting to do something or Blue Origin wanting to do, like, I'm sorry, I don't trust them. I don't think they're acting in the interests of the planet or the people in general. And if something like that were to be undertaken, I would want it to be a public project, not a private project. But just in general, I don't think it's a bad idea. It's just I wouldn't want it to be something that billionaires do. Black Cover 95. In previous videos, you said how you'd prefer Batman to be a millionaire instead of a billionaire, and Superman be limited to his Golden Age power set. Would you also want to similarly nerf the rest of the Justice League? How about the villains? What is Darkseid like in Steve Shives' DCU? Also, you mentioned a realistic take on a more toned-down Superman. Wouldn't there be plenty of potential in a story deconstructing an OP Silver Age style suits? Oh, absolutely. Yes, and I think Grant Morrison demonstrated that in All-Star Superman. That was very much a take on a Silver Age Superman. Like, he was a super powerful Superman. And that's a brilliant story. That's one of the best Superman stories ever written, I think. And drawn as well. Frank Quitely is fantastic artist. So yeah, I mean, Superman doesn't need to be powered down to 1940s Fleischer Brothers shorts level of power in order to be an interesting character. I mean, God, the Christopher Reeve Superman was way more powerful than that, and I thought his movies were one of the pinnacles of the character. So that's just how I would try to approach him as a writer. But I mean, what is Darkseid like in my DCU? Non-existent. You would never see Darkseid because I am deeply bored by him. One of my mottos when writing Superman, when thinking about Superman as a storyteller, when I'm thinking about like fanfic about Superman, stuff like that, one of my mottos in my head is Superman is not an astronaut. I would not write, I'm not terribly interested in stories that send Superman to other planets, that send Superman far out into space. Do I want Superman to stay on Earth? I'm interested in what he does on Earth. I'm interested in what he does in Metropolis. That is where Superman is. That is where he stays. That is where I write him when I'm thinking about Superman stories. Um, so you would never see Darkseid. You know, I simple answer to a simple question. Um, But would I similarly depower the rest of the Justice League? I don't know. I mean, see, with a character like Green Lantern, I think is an astronaut. I think one of my ways into that character is to view him as someone who is an astronaut, who is an explorer, who would take advantage of the power of the ring and being a member of the Corps to go out into the galaxy. And so you could tell more sci-fi planet hopping kind of stories with Green Lantern, and it would make sense because that's how I view the character. That's my in to that character. Like, how do I understand this guy? How do I find something to latch onto about him that makes me care about him and makes me understand him and makes me able to imagine stories featuring him? Oh, he could be the astronaut. He could be an astronaut mixed with like a cop. He could be the astronaut law enforcement officer of the galaxy. That's a way I can look at Green Lantern and think, okay, that makes sense. I can do something with that. But that's not Superman to me. Superman is a guy who stays on Earth and helps out on Earth. Um, you know, which is why depowering him like that would not be such a huge deal for me. But no, it wouldn't necessarily be about reducing the amount of power that they have. It would just be about for me personally as a writer, finding the essences of those characters and then sticking with those and being true to those. Kemp Chalmers, hey Steve, an old nemesis of yours, fat degenerate neckbeard, recently announced that they'd be running for president in 2024. In a nightmare scenario where he and Trump square off in a general election, who would you vote for? God help us all. I have no idea what you're talking about. I assume you're referring to the so-called amazing atheist when you say fat degenerate neckbeard, but I pay no attention to him. I was not aware that that is kind of adorable. He's running for president. Yeah, okay. And so was Hulk Hogan, who's like a million times more famous than he is. Didn't get anywhere with that. I honestly pay no attention to him. I have no idea what he does. I don't give a shit about him. Um, if he ran for president and there was a nightmare scenario where he and Trump were the two major candidates in a general election, then that's when I would be voting for a third party candidate because I clearly voting for either one of them would not be an option. I would vote for a third party candidate. And if those two were the two main choices, something tells me there would be a lot more viable third party candidates in that election than there usually are. So I would vote for one of them, and hopefully so would most other people. Jacob Monroe, hello, Steve. Here's to rooting for Adam Page this weekend. Please don't overthink this AEW. Are you excited for Full Gear? Yes, I am. I ordered it like 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think I ordered it as soon as I saw that it was available to purchase. I am super excited about it. And yes, I hope that Adam Page wins the title as well. I don't think that the program between Page and Omega is super hot. Like, I don't think it has been handled as well as it could have been, but I really like Adam Page. I like the overall sort of story that they have told with him up to this point. It's been a lot of fits and starts, which I think has hurt him. And I don't mean just, I mean, the most recent stoppage was because he and his wife had a baby and he took paternity leave, which I think is great. And I don't blame him for that. But there were fits and starts leading up to that as well. It's not like that was the only interruption. There have been the long-term booking of AEW's world title picture has not been good for a while. It's been very uneven. But I like Page. I think he's great in the ring. I think he's been cutting some really good promos lately, and I would love to see him win the title on Saturday. I like Kenny Omega. I have nothing against him. I think he's a terrific wrestler. I've liked a lot of his matches, but I have not been a fan of his world title reign. I think his world title reign has been very uneven and very boring. I do not think he has come across as the top guy in the company. I don't think um, he has set the tone for the company the way that a world champion should, and the way that other world champions, like the way that Moxley did, the way that Jericho did before him. I mean, nothing against Kenny Omega. I think he's a terrific talent, but I have not been a big fan of his world title reign at all. And I would love to see them change it up and do something different. And I think Adam Page is a good choice to do that. And it would be a great feel good moment to end that show on a high note, send people home happy. And yeah, and I am excited for Fulger. I'm excited about Danielson versus Miro. I'm super hyped for Punk versus Kingston after that angle they did on Rampage last week, and then they did a little sort of re-up of it on Dynamite Wednesday night, where they had the pull apart in the parking lot. And yeah, I'm super excited for that, because that angle they did on Rampage in the ring, where Punk called him a bum and Kingston got in his face and said, "Nobody wants you here. Everybody's afraid to tell you except for me. Nobody wants you here." And he's like, after the match, maybe you'll get depressed and you'll quit for another 7 years. And then Punk fucking headbutts him and they're brawling and pulled apart. That was the best wrestling angle I have seen in years. Like, I think it's the best angle AEW has ever done. It's one of the best wrestling angles I've seen from anywhere in a really, really, really long time. I was a huge fan of that, and I'm really, really hyped for that match. So yeah, I'm excited for Full Gear. This mutter fluffer, some random geek who is tired of this shit, quote, "The Nazis were socialists because they had socialist in their name. And if you wanted to kill the rich, as socialists do, you had to kill the Jews, since they were the rich as the moneylenders." Unquote. Something I just heard Saturday at the bar. He was in the group I was with. I had a few drinks while he was sober. I asked, "Are you serious?" And he said, "Yes." I then said, "I'm a socialist and a communist." This man really does believe that Nazis were based off of socialism. So in a way, he does think me, a socialist and communist, is almost like a Nazi. Arg! They also commented in the past on a post of mine on Facebook about the US's enslaved of folks from Africa, saying, in the past, white people were enslaved by other cultures. So Saturday at the bar, I launch into my lecture, everyone about political theory 101, especially someone else said, I think that means eventually, someone else said that Sweden and Denmark are truly socialist countries. Erg, Steve, why do I store it into people who think I am a Nazi? I don't know, but I don't know what the situation was there at the bar on Saturday night. But I mean, if I were in your position and I was able to, if I had my own transportation or access to transportation, and it was an option for me to just get up and leave, that's what I would have done. Like, as soon as somebody started spouting that kind of ignorant bullshit, I would have just gotten the fuck up and left. If that was an option. Maybe that wasn't an option. Maybe you were there with other people in the group and you couldn't just get up and leave or whatever. But if that was an option, that's what the fuck I would do. 'Cause again, I feel like this is becoming a theme of this stream, but like, life's too fucking short. Life's too short to be fucking around jacking off with these assholes. Like, just find something else to do. Hang out with better people. Jesus Christ. Also, I mean, like, did he actually say that he thought you were a Nazi? Or was he just saying, well, Nazis are socialists, and you're saying, and then you are taking that the next step and saying, so by extension, I, as a socialist, must be a Nazi? I don't know. I mean, like, if it's possible to just walk away from the guy, to just get up and leave and go somewhere else, that's what I would do. Fuck that guy. Fuck people that think that. I mean, just because the word socialist is in their name. I mean, the word democratic is in the official name of North Korea. It doesn't make it a democracy, So, like, I don't know. I feel like you need to find better people to hang out with. CMAC, who is most decidedly not submitting late this week, except for the late edit. Hi, Steve. First, I really enjoyed your Batman video this week. I'm not actually a huge Batman fan, but I really did enjoy it, so thanks for that. Well, you're welcome, my friend. Away from that, however, as ever, I'm incredibly disheartened by the loss in Virginia. Yes, our candidate was exciting as a wet blanket, and the near loss in New Jersey, but I'm even more frustrated by the parties effectively deciding to move to the right. We do this every time. I'm screaming to everyone who will listen to look at the local races in Florida, of all places, where Social Democrats won in significant local elections. If we want to move the party left, we need it to come from the ground up. These people are the future of our party if we can build them up. Vote local, people. Your thoughts? Any races you're aware of where actual progressives won? ETA, holy crap, Bannon was indicted. Yeah, I saw that on Twitter. Shortly before I think I was getting ready to start the show. So yeah, that's very good news. The Justice Department has agreed to charge him with criminal contempt of Congress. Thank God. I think that's terrific. But yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I can't think of any races off the top of my head, like local races where progressives won, but I agree with you completely. I do think it needs to come from the ground up. I think local branches of the Democratic Party need to be involved in this, need to be putting up more progressive, more left-leaning candidates, and building a base. You know, the party will not be pushed to the left from the top down. It will be pushed to the left from the bottom up. That's where long-lasting reform and change always starts, from the bottom, and then it filters up. Um, I agree with you completely. I think local elections are important. I think state elections are extremely important, and congressional elections, which are contested in what are basically local districts. You know, United States House of Representatives elections are local elections. They're elections to federal offices, but those are local elections. And you know, you've seen cases like the members of the Squad, who are quite progressive, especially when compared to the rest of the Democratic Party, and have been able to win and establish pretty strong voter bases, and hold their seats with a lot of stability, despite being very progressive, because there is an appetite for that, and because that is the party that the Democratic Party should be working toward becoming, not sliding to the right. And I agree with you. It's incredibly frustrating because every time a Democrat loses an election because they failed to energize their progressive base, which I think is what often happens, the lesson they take from it is, oh, we must not have done enough to appeal to the center and to the right, which is just baffling to me. Like, why would you not try to appeal? And look, and I don't want to put all the blame on the party, because I also have a lot of blame to go around to progressives who didn't bother to vote because they're like, well, you know, like, I get it. It would be great if the Democrats would run more progressive candidates. I think they should. I wish they would. But if an election is up in your district and there's a choice between a Republican and a Democrat who maybe isn't as far to the left as you would like, who isn't as progressive as they should be, but is still better than a Republican, then you need to get off your fucking ass and vote for the Democrat. Like, it's not, your hands are not, progressives who stayed home in Virginia, their hands are not clean here. I'm pissed at them too. I'm pissed at the party for running Terry McAuliffe and for running a shitty campaign. And I'm pissed at the Democratic establishment for constantly chasing Republican votes and centrist votes and right-wing votes and conservative votes instead of energizing the left. They should definitely be doing that. And it's crazy making that they aren't. But progressives who stay home and allow Republicans to win races like this, there's you know, their hands are dirty too. I don't let them off the hook either. But yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you completely. It should come from the ground up, and running progressives in local races is absolutely important. Dana, who prefers Star Wars anyway. You know, I don't really care about Star Trek at all, but I realize that some of your other viewers do, so this question is dedicated to them. What is the most hilariously awful episode of Star Trek in any series ever, and why? Bonus points for discussing any and all runners-up. Well, that could take all night, so I will just give you sort of the top pick and then maybe one or two runners-up, because this is such a fun subject. The most hilariously bad Star Trek ever. Um, I might have to go with what used to be the consensus pick for worst episode of any Star Trek show, which is Spock's brain from the original Star Trek. It has been surpassed in the minds of many fans by other shows from other series since then. But if we're talking specifically about not just bad episode, but hilariously awful episode, okay, so the premise of Spock's brain, for anyone who doesn't know, is that aliens have a computer that runs their planet, but the computer needs an organic brain in order to work. So these aliens steal the best brain that they can find, which is, of course, Spock's brain. So they take Spock's brain out of his head and they plug it into their computer. But Captain Kirk and Dr. McCoy find Spock's body, which is still alive, even though it doesn't have a brain. And so they say to themselves, well, we need to find Spock's brain so we can put Spock's brain back in his body, but we need to keep Spock's body alive. And we need to take Spock's body with us so that when we find his brain, we can stick it right back in, because eventually Spock's body is going to die, even with our medical interventions here, right? So McCoy puts a little hat on Spock that sends signals to the rest of his body that can be controlled by remote control. So Spock's body, without his brain, spends most of the episode just kind of walking around completely senseless, being, controlled by remote control. And then at the end of the episode, they find Spock's brain. And Dr. McCoy, of course, doesn't know how to do that level of complex brain surgery in order to connect Spock's brain back up the way it needs to be connected. So he gets in the alien's learning machine, which is also a thing in the episode, that teaches him how to do the brain surgery in like a few minutes. Like, it just dumps the information into his head, and then he reconnects Spock's brain and everything is fine. And it's all, everybody lives happily ever after. But yeah, Spock's brain is probably the most laughably bad episode in Star Trek. But there are others. There are runners up, as you said. Threshold, Voyager is probably up there. That's the one where Tom Paris flies past warp 10, which is like the Star Trek equivalent of traveling faster than the speed of light would be in real life. Like, it's the impossible speed, and Tom Paris goes beyond the impossible speed in the first act of the episode. It's no big deal. He just builds a shuttlecraft that can go faster than the impossible speed, as you do. And it causes him to, quote unquote, evolve into a higher being, which in this case turns out to be a gigantic salamander. And then that's not wacky enough. So he kidnaps Captain Janeway and flies her faster than warp 10 as well. So she turns into a giant salamander as well. And then the two of them mate and they have little salamander babies, which are then abandoned to die on a planet when Chakotay and Tuvok find them and bring Janeway and Paris back to the ship to change them back into their human forms, right? They just leave the babies there to starve. That's a pretty bad episode. Genesis, the TNG episode, which I mentioned as a really good Halloween episode, but it's also just a really bad episode, where the crew de-evolves into lower forms of life from further back on their various evolutionary chains. That's pretty funny. Sub Rosa, the episode of TNG where Dr. Crusher fucks a ghost. I didn't make that up. That's literally what happens in the episode. It's the episode where Dr. Crusher fucks a ghost. And it's the same ghost that until recently was fucking her grandmother. That's an actual episode of Star Trek The Next Generation. Dr. Crusher fucks a ghost who was also fucking her grandmother. So yeah, those are some of the ones that come to mind. Russell says, "Hey Steve, how are you? Hopefully well. Anyways, as I stated, I will be dedicating this Q&A to the late Dean Stockwell. In honor of him, many have asked, what was your favorite Al moment? Mine was the ending of The Leap Home 2. What is yours? Most people found MIA to be very touching, with the song Georgia on my mind. Even though the finale has its flaws, one thing I did love about it was Sam's choice to save Al's marriage. He was credited with numerous film and TV titles, and he will be heavily missed. Finally, could you do a small review remembering Dean Stockwell? Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned during Dana and I's stream on Wednesday, because that was the day after he died, um, uh, that, not only was he, of course, Al in Quantum Leap, but he was also, he did an episode of one of my favorite shows ever, Nowhere Man, where he was splendid. He was, of course, he guest starred in an episode of Star Trek Enterprise where he reunited with Scott Bakula after Quantum Leap. That was pretty cool, even though the episode itself was nothing to write home about, but it was just cool to see those two actors together again. And he was a tremendous actor. He was good in everything I ever saw him in. I was always happy to see him turn up in something after having been such a huge fan of his from Quantum Leap. And yeah, he will be greatly missed. He had a wonderful career. My favorite Al moment, the one you mentioned from The Leap Home 2 is good. The ending of the series finale where Sam leaps into to Beth's house to tell her to wait for Al because he's a prisoner of war. That's good. The ending of MIA, I think I said in the chat on Wednesday, if the ending to MIA where Al in his hologram form is there with his wife, who he knows is going to leave him because they haven't been able to change the past. And he's there and he's a hologram, so he can't touch her and she can't see him, but he can see her and hear her, and he's just there with her. If that doesn't do it for you, I don't know what to tell you. Like, that is such a beautiful scene, and Dean Stockwell plays that so wonderfully. That's a great moment. But I think my favorite moment for Al as a character is from my one of my favorite episodes of Quantum Leap, which is called Running for Honor, which is where Sam leaps into a naval cadet who may or may not be gay. And the episode is about this person that Sam leaps into experiencing discrimination because the other cadets think he's gay, and he may or may not be. His actual sexuality is not definitively revealed in the episode, but it's just, the point is he's suspected of being gay, and so he's persecuted and mistreated by the other cadets. And Al begins the episode expressing some homophobic attitudes. But by the end of the episode, he has realized that he was wrong, and he has grown as a person, and he has come to now sympathize with the gay characters in the story and realize that they are worthy of the United States Navy, and that there's no reason to exclude. And then again, I remember this was in the 90s when Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and whether or not to allow gay people to openly serve in the military was a big hot button issue. And so Quantum Leap was coming out strongly in favor of letting gay people serve openly in the military. And having Al start the episode as being closed-minded on the issue, and by the end of the episode, he had turned around and realized he was wrong. And he even says to Sam, because he expresses a more supportive attitude late in the episode, and Sam looks at him kind of surprised. And he's like, really, like, I thought you didn't like gay people, or I thought you said that, people like him don't belong in the military. And Al says, I was wrong. I've, spending time with these guys and getting to know them and seeing what kind of people they are like that it's convinced me that I was wrong. And I thought that was a beautiful moment and a great moment for that character. So that is my favorite, my favorite Al moment for sure. Next question is from David Colby, who says, I finished watching Star Wars Rebels, and holy shit, you can tell that Star Wars has been bought by a gutless corporation. About 30% of season 3 and 4 were spent building up the character Saw Gerrera and going, look at this guy who's a rebel, but too much, which is the trite way to make complex villains for the past few years. What the hell is up with people trying to inject moral complexity into a space opera for kids where evil is a measurable physical force that you can track with a blood test? I put moral complexity in quotes because I don't actually think that Saw Gerrera is complex, just that the writers decided to retroactively make the Rebel Alliance a bunch of spineless losers who can't get anything done. God, you have to see what they did to Mon Mothman. She shows up 6 times, and each time It's purely to go, oh, we can't do that. It's too dangerous. Lady, you're in a war. I really am glad that for all my problems with Discovery, at least Star Trek is avoiding that. Um, I can't really speak to this specifically because I've never watched Star Wars Rebels and I have no intention of watching it because I just don't give a shit about animated Star Wars stuff. Um, but I'll take your word for it. like, and like Mon Mothman, she was the one who was like sort of in charge of the rebels, right? She was in, I think, Return of the Jedi, and then she came back for Rogue One, right? She's the lady like with the red hair and kind of the short bob haircut. Is that who I'm thinking of? The character means absolutely nothing to me. Like when you say you should see what they did to Mon Mothman, like I think of like, oh, like I don't really, you know, but whatever. Like I say, it's not my thing. I haven't watched it, but as far as moral complexity, I mean, I think maybe part of it is that, as you say, it's they're doing this in stories that are written at a level to be grasped by children, and there's only so much complexity you can build into something like that. And maybe if that is the case, it's better just to not do it. Like just if the world you have created won't bear really deep, interesting, intriguing moral complexity in characters, then just don't do it. And like I said, I mean, that I'm just sort of grasping at straws here because I haven't seen the show and I'm not particularly interested in the show. But that sounds like the problem you're describing, and it might be a case of if you can't do it, don't do it. You know, like if you want to have morally complex characters, but the show that you are writing them for is not capable of supporting the kind of complexity that you want, then just don't do it. Just do something else. You know, not everything has to be morally complex. That's okay. You know, but yeah, so that's my 2 cents on that. Relic 5000. Hey, Steve, hope you are well. I racked my brain for a question to ask this week and could only come up with a poorly worded question about the appeal of pro wrestling. I've never been a fan personally. I've even been somewhat disdainful in the past, though not so much anymore. I understand the spectacle of one man or woman beating the hell out of another, but it's all fake. It's usually easy to guess who's going to win ahead of time, and that takes some of the fun out of it for me, not to mention shallow plot lines and bad stories. You yourself once equated Vince McMahon's storytelling to the dumpster behind a Papa John's. I guess what I'm asking is why is pro wrestling so popular with the peoples? I did say it was poorly worded. Um, this is difficult because I know a lot of the things that I enjoy about pro wrestling are not necessarily the things that draw people to the arena or get people to watch it on TV. But I think part of it is the personalities. I think if you look at the eras in history where wrestling has been really, really popular, and we are currently not in such an era, but if you look at the eras where wrestling has been super popular, it has always been anchored by a major star, or multiple major stars. But like in the 80s, when I first became a fan, of course, it was Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was a big star. He was a draw. He was an attraction. There were other wrestlers that were big box office attractions. Andre the Giant, Ric Flair, Sting to a certain extent, Dusty Rhodes, the Road Warriors. Like there were wrestlers that were big box office attractions. They were larger than life. They were big personalities. They had ways of wrestling and of talking and of acting and just had personas that drew people to them, that made fans want to see them. And, not unlike movie stars or rock stars, there's just something compelling about them. We just want to see them and want to see what they'll do. And if they're having a fight, even if you know in your head that it's predetermined, that it's not a real sport, that they're not actually fighting, you want to see what'll happen, you know? So I think that's a big part of it. The appeal is star power. Um, and when we've gone into periods where there haven't been those big stars, you've seen the business kind of go down a little bit because after Hogan kind of came off his peak, it went into a trough for a while and it didn't really come back to those levels it was in the 80s, and eventually even surpassed those levels, until we got Steve Austin. And Steve Austin came up, and then The Rock came up in his wake and became a big star in his own right. And Goldberg in WCW became a big star, and Mick Foley and some other great stars came about from that generation or the generation that followed them. And it came up again for a while before it went back down because the star power sort of ebbed away. So I think that's a lot of it. I think as a storytelling format, when it's done right, when it's done at its best, it's a very simple way of telling a very simple story. I mean, you said it's two guys or two women, just two people beating the hell out of each other. And that is true, but a good wrestling match tells a story. And a good wrestling match shows you a conflict between two people. And when there is a winner and a loser of that conflict, it should be for a reason that you, as the viewer of the match, can understand. It should tell a story. And that is compelling to people, And also, there, even though it's fake, that it's not a real fight. Hopefully, if you're a fan and if you're invested in it, you want to see who wins the match. You're invested in it like you're invested in the outcome of a story from another movie. Like if you love Batman and you're watching a really good Batman movie or reading a really good Batman comic, even though it's just a story, and even though that Batman's probably going to catch the Joker because that's just the way it usually goes, you still want to get to the end of the story to see what happens. And in a wrestling match, it's the same way. You want to see what happens. You want to, I want to see this weekend, this Saturday, is a big AEW pay-per-view. I want to see if Adam Page will beat Kenny Omega and win the world title. I want to see what happens. That's the main reason why I'm buying the show. Yes, I hope that the matches are good. I hope I am entertained. I hope that I get some really great wrestling. But at the bottom of it, I want to see what happens. I want to see CM Punk have a match with Eddie Kingston, and I want to see who wins. I want to see who wins between Bryan Danielson and Miro, because I honestly don't know who's going to win that one. There are reasons to go either way with it. I think it's probably going to be Danielson, but it would not shock me if it was Miro. I think it probably won't be, but I think there's a realistic chance that it could be. Especially if Page is going to win the world title, because then you have a babyface champion and a heel number one contender. But there's all kinds of ways it could go, and I want to see what happens. So that's part of it too. That's part of the appeal too, is getting invested in it emotionally, the way you would with any other kind of story, or the way you would with a legitimate sport. And you want to see what happens, and you want to see if your favorites win and what happens next. And finally, last question from Eric Allen. All right, Steve, name 3 fictional characters that you admire. Mine are Jean-Luc Picard, Peter Parker, and Leia Skywalker. Hope you're well, and hope this makes the cutoff before go live time. Cheers, my friend. Well, thank you, my friend, very much. And yes, you made the cutoff with time to spare. 3 fictional characters that I admire. Here we go. Sherlock Holmes, Lois Lane, Godzilla. And if people in the live chat would like me to elaborate, I would be happy to, but your question did not call for elaboration, so I will just lay them on the table for now. Sherlock Holmes, Lois Lane, and Godzilla. Those are 3 fictional characters I admire. That's it for the patron and member questions. So I will turn now for the remainder of the show to everybody in the live chat, and we can hang out and have some fun, and I'll answer whatever questions you have, and we can talk about whatever you want to talk about, and have a great old time. So let's see what people are saying in the live chat. Yes, Kirok 2011, Godzilla. Yes, Godzilla. Dana, I think everybody knows that I admire Superman. I mean, Superman is definitely a character I admire. But I wanted to get Lois in there because I think Lois is a really admirable character, and she's, she doesn't have superpowers, and she's a journalist. She has a noble profession with an important job in society, and she's a writer, and there are all kinds of things about Lois to admire. And yes, Godzilla. And specifically like 1960 sort of, mid Showa era, mid Showa era Godzilla, where he was like a hero. Godzilla was a good guy. Godzilla protected Tokyo from other monsters. Godzilla was the guy that you would send for. You'd send somebody, you know, to Monster Island. They'd be like, "Oh shit, Gigon's here. Go get Godzilla," right? And Godzilla would come and kick some ass, and then he'd go back. So yes, Godzilla. Godzilla's a hero, my friends. Godzilla's a hero. No, here's a super chat from John Burns. Thank you, my friend. He says, title, Life's Too Short to Be Jacking Off Fascists. Code of Honor. Hilariously bad or just, oh my God, terrible. Are you enjoying a Ron Rogers anxiety? I don't really get that reference. But Code of Honor is pretty bad. I mean, if it weren't for the racism, I think it would be easier to enjoy as like a so bad it's good kind of thing. But yeah, definitely a terrible episode for sure. Opinions no one cares about. Why are we so worried about what happens in Washington, D.C. when Washington Marvel is so much better? The thing about Washington Marvel that makes it better is that it's not constantly rebooting its fucking timeline. If Washington, D.C. would just commit to a fucking timeline, you know what I mean? Like, I think it would be a lot better. Kemp Chalmers says, would you be open to holding a meet and greet for your patrons and taking them on a tour of Antietam Battlefield? I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I mean, there's way better people to give you a tour of Antietam than me. Like, I would not be a very good Battlefield tour guide at all. I could show you around to places, like I could show you like places where I go to climb fucking trees. But in terms of like the actual historical importance of what happened on the battle and when, like, I know a little bit about it and I know kind of the broad strokes of what happened that day and why particular areas of the battlefield are important. But I don't think I'd be a very good tour guide. You know, and I don't think that many people would show up. But I mean, in theory, I'm not totally opposed to it. No. Dataport DOS says Superman rebranding, truth and justice in a world of law and order, yay or nay? I mean, it's better than truth, justice, and the American way. But I mean, I think if they wanted to rebrand Superman's slogan there and they wanted to get away from truth, justice, and the American way, which I think, is perfectly reasonable to want to get away from, I think they should just go back to what it was before, which is he fights a never-ending battle for truth and justice. Like, just make it truth and justice. Those two are fine. Some random geek says, is wrestling soap opera for men? It is often described that way. I don't really see it that way, but I understand that it does have that appeal for some people. For me, it's not quite that, but I mean, that is a really popular way of describing it. I wouldn't, reject that. Super chat from Kirok 2011 says Dean Stockwell also guest starred on Lois and Clark, where he played one of my favorite one-off villains in a campy show. He makes it real and scary. I kind of remember that one. Yeah, I don't remember that one super vividly, but now that you've mentioned it, I remember Dean Stockwell on Lois and Clark for sure. Oh, John Burns. Okay, thank you for the super chat and thank you for clarifying. Aaron Rodgers. Okay, sorry. Aaron Rodgers, the dipshit football player who is an anti-vaxxer. Yeah. Yeah. Duralta Trekkie says, sorry to bring up the Snyderverse again. Well, then why are you doing it, man? Why are you doing it? The Snyderians are now saying that Henry Cavill is anti-Snyder because he said that Whedon let him be Superman. Well, that's true, though. I mean, I like this. By the way, I love Snyderians. It makes them sound like a cult, which is what the fuck they are. So I love that name for them, the Snyderians. But yeah, I mean, that's what happened. The Whedon cut does show him being much closer to Superman than he ever was in Man of Steel or Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice or in the Snyder cut of Justice League. Like, that's just the way it is. You actually see evidence that Superman gives a shit about other people and cares about helping people. That's That is an essential part of every other version of the character. Like the only major version of Superman ever presented where he just doesn't seem to give a shit about other people besides his mom and Lois. Everybody else can get fucked as far as he's concerned, is the Snyder version of Superman. You know? So yeah, it's completely fair for him to say that in the Whedon cut he got to be Superman, because that's true. Who the fuck did he save in Man of Steel other than Lois or his mom? The people on that oil rig before he was even Superman. Once he became Superman, once he put on the cape, who the fuck does he save that isn't someone who is a personal friend of his? Just Another Broke Nerd says, do you watch Young Justice? Outside of Batman the Animated Series, I found it to be a fantastic adaptation, and wow, has it gotten dark in recent seasons. I have watched up to midway through season 2. I watched a couple episodes of it just recently because I had watched it and then I kind of put it down for a while, and I picked it back up a little bit. I've liked what I've watched of it so far. It didn't really grab me in the first season, but by the time I got to the second season, it had grown on me and I started to really like it. I think it's good. You know, I will eventually finish it. I think it's good. Serrative Geek says, would Stuffy be a good tour guide? He'd probably be better than me. Yeah. John Burns says Dean Stockwell, Battlestar Galactica and Dune 80s. Yes, he was in both of those. Absolutely. He was in all kinds of stuff. 205 AD says, question, if Amazing Atheist was a Dem president, wouldn't the party prevent him from doing too much harm? I think a Democratic Trump would be inherently less dangerous for that reason. I agree with you, but I still wouldn't vote for him. I would vote for somebody else. Dana says, please tell me we're going to find the salamander babies on Ensign's log. Well, see, that doesn't happen for many years after the point that we're at right now. Like, we're kind of just getting into season 2 of TNG at this point, where we're at in Ensign's log, and that doesn't happen until what, season like season 3, I think. Isn't it season 2 or 3 of Voyager? So that's like way far in the future. So we have a long way to go before we ever get, unless we do some time travel shenanigans, which I guess we could. But I would love to do something with the salamander babies. I would love for us to like find the salamander babies and be like, who abandoned these babies to die on this planet? What kind of parent would do this? You know? Yeah, look, you're right there with me. You're right there with me. Liam Foley, I agree with you 100%. They never establish Superman as being heroic, as being a force for good. Yeah, John Burns with the super chat. Snyderian sounds like a cult led by an arachnid. I can kind of see that. But yeah, back to Liam. Yeah, I think that was because the thing is, I think I mentioned this in my review of Man of Steel way back in the day, and I mentioned it again in Batman v Superman, and I've talked about this a lot. Like, there's this major gap between what the movies tell us and what the movies show us. They act like that version of Superman is like the Christopher Reeve version of Superman. Like he's this great hero who helps people and saves people and is this beacon of hope and light and goodness. But we never, ever, ever see him acting that way, except for a few minutes in the theatrical cut of the Justice League movie. That's it. That's it. That's the only time we see that version of Superman behave as though he gives a shit about anybody, and that helping people and saving people's lives and minimizing civilian deaths in the midst of their superhero stuff. That's the only time we see any indication that he cares about any of that. So I think that's a huge problem. They're uh, the animated movies that I talked about in my DC animated movie universe video last week, where the animated adaptation of the Death of Superman and Reign of the Supermen. There are little moments in his fight with Doomsday where you see him being Superman. He's in the middle of fighting Doomsday. They're having this big slugfest from one side of Metropolis to the other. And there are still those moments where he sees people in trouble and he goes to help them. He stops fighting Doomsday and goes to help people because that's who he is. That's important. And in showing us that, the movie is telling us this is a good person. He's a hero. He wants to help people. He wants to use his power to help people. He sees people in danger and he tries to take them out of danger, right? He's a good person. So when he is killed, or when it appears that he is killed, it feels sad. It feels like a loss. You never get that in the Snyder movies. The Snyder movies don't do any of that work, and that's why they fail. Another super chat here from John Burns, who says, someone posted a report about a UK school telling boys to wear skirts to school. I posted a GIF with Rowdy Roddy Piper in a kilt. Scotland's in the UK. Well, good for you. Good for you. Hot Rod. And here's another super chat from Stephen Fenn, who says, one thing about pro wrestlers, I've seen a few of them do Hot Ones interviews, and they all seem like awesome people off stage, all with great stories to tell. I think with the current generation of wrestlers, the guys and gals who are stars right now, a lot of them do seem like really cool people. And I would agree with that for sure. Yeah. Oh, and Philip Kehoe, yes, Maggie Mae Fish's series on Zack Snyder in general is great, and her video about Superman is terrific. Yeah, the Superman Saves the Cat is a great video, and definitely nails the the importance of scenes like that. 25 AD says Banks also has a lot of right libertarian fans, even though he meant his sci-fi to be left libertarian. What would you do if your book's fans told you its political message was opposite? Well, I mean, I would, for whatever it was worth, I would make it clear that that was not my intention. You know, and if I would maybe take another look at the book from that perspective and see if that was a fair interpretation of my work, even though that wasn't my intention. And if it was, the next time I write a book, I would try to plug that hole and make sure that that it could not so easily be interpreted in that way. Hey, Radical Bacon, I'm good. How are you? CMAX says, as a non-wrestling fan, but a child of the 80s, Iranian American, I have to ask, how could the Iron Sheik not be one of your marquee wrestlers? The Iron Sheik. I am the former WWF champion. Oh, God, I love the Iron Sheik. The Iron Sheik is so great. One of the great heels of the 80s. And when he was younger and healthier, was a fantastic wrestler. Of course, he was an Olympic athlete. He wrestled in the Olympics, was an amateur trained wrestler. He could actually wrestle. He could, and was super strong and could, throw a suplex like nobody's business. And yeah, Iron Sheik was great, was a great heel. And apparently in real life is absolutely nuts. So there's that on top of everything else. But yeah, Iron Sheik is terrific. Tells a great story about how, maybe true, maybe not, about how Vern Gagne, who was the promoter that he worked for before he jumped to the WWF, and of course, he jumped to the WWF and he was made the transitional champion between babyface champion Bob Backlund and babyface champion Hulk Hogan. Vince McMahon wanted to move the world title from Bob Backlund to Hulk Hogan, but he didn't want to do a babyface versus babyface match and have Hulk Hogan beat Bob Backlund. So he had the Iron Sheik beat Bob Backlund and win the world title through nefarious heelish means. And then Hogan beat the Iron Sheik like the next month for the title, and he began his 4-year long Hulkamania world title reign. But Iron Sheik tells a story that apparently Vern Gagne, the rival promoter, wanted the Iron Sheik not to lose the title to Hogan as was planned, but to actually shoot on Hogan in the ring and break his leg and take the WWF title back to the AWA with him. I don't know how much of that is actually true, but the way Iron Sheik tells it, he totally believes it. He tell me to break that jabroni Hulk Hogan's leg. For sure. Another super chat here from Kirik 2011. I feel like I have to clarify. It's not that I hate the finale of Quantum Leap, but as a finale, it was disappointing. They had so much story left to cover, and then there's a second part coming. Radical Bacon. I think, in real life, Hulk Hogan has always been a heel. That's the thing. That's like the disillusioning thing for as a someone who was a huge fan of Hulk Hogan as a child, someone who, because in 1990 they did a big angle where Hulk Hogan supposedly had his ribs broken and he was out of action like for most of the summer. And they did this big letter writing campaign that was actually just a really clever ploy to expand their mailing list. But where they asked you to write a letter to Hulk Hogan, to like a get well soon letter to the Hulkster, so he knows that you love him and you care about him. And of course I wrote a letter. Right. I was one of those kids. I was 10 years old and I wrote a letter to my hero Hulk Hogan to make sure he got better. Right. Imagine how disillusioning it was much later in life to realize what a piece of shit he is. Like, he's just a massive piece of shit and like a shameless liar, even for a wrestler of his generation, many of whom are known to be professional bullshit artists who are always working, and always, if they're telling a story, you better get it verified by a couple other people before you decide whether it's true. And even judged by that standard, Hogan is full of shit. Like, his lies are legendary and laughably transparent. Anyway, here's the second part of Kirak 2011's question. Stories like the Evil Leaper series or Sam's daughter or the now reunited Al and Beth helping him get home. Just a lot of content they could have gone with. Well, yeah, but I mean, the thing is, like, the series was canceled, so they didn't have the option to pursue those stories. And actually, if I remember correctly, I think they made that series finale not entirely sure if the show was going to be picked up or not. When you watch it now, it seems like it was obviously a series finale, but apparently they felt that they had left the door open, that they could have come back and done a fifth season or a sixth season if they had been picked up. So there was a possibility that they could have explored some of those storylines if the show had been picked up for another season, but it wasn't. So, by the way, some random geek just posted a member message saying, "Give Joanna money, her latest begging bowl," and then there's the link there in the message. So please, everybody, check out Joanna's begging bowl, and if you can afford to help her out, please help her out. Super chat from Kemp Chalmers says, "Which wrestling act was more problematic, the Ugandan Giant or Crime Time?" Ooh, boy, that's a tough one. I would say Kamala was more problematic, just because he worked that gimmick for like 25 or 30 years. And it was racist from the start. I think that gimmick started in the late 70s or early 80s, and that was Jerry Lawler's idea. And it was racist from the very beginning, and he worked that gimmick everywhere for his entire career, and it was never not a horrible. Crime Time was bad. Crime Time was where there were two. There was a black tag team, and of course they were thugs. They were criminals. They were constantly stealing from people because that's one of the only gimmicks for black people that Vince McMahon understands. He's like, let's make them criminals. That, not to minimize that at all, because Crime Time was terrible, but Kamala was, he was, black people as a savage, black people from the darkest Central African, you know what I mean? Like, it was like the most regressive, retrograde, like 19th century savage man from the bush, headhunter, cannibal guy. Like it was awful. It was awful. I think clearly it was Kamala was the more problematic. Um, Ooh, 255 AD. This is a good one. I saw Dune today, but a power surge meant the movie stopped for 43 minutes. If you're watching a movie and it just stops, how much time would you give them to fix it before you leave? I mean, presumably you were in a movie theater. Um, if the management of the theater comes in and says that they think they will be able to get it running again, like in other words, if they say, "Look, don't leave, like we're going to get this fixed," then I would probably stick around. I mean, if it got to be like, longer than maybe an hour, I might be like, all right, time to go. But a lot of that would depend on how I was feeling and what else I had going on that day and how much I wanted to see the movie. you know, it would depend. But I think, I don't know. If you really want to see the movie and you wait for 45 minutes, I don't, that's probably not unreasonable if you really want to see the movie. Um, Aaron Millay says the Cincinnatus project is a success. We now dragoon the unwilling and force them into the presidency for 4 years. What person who would never run deserves the job? Oh, which person who would never run for president deserves the job? Wow. Um, I have no idea. I have no idea. If anybody in the chat has suggestions, I would love to hear them. I honestly don't know. Scott Dittman says, any interest in Ghostbusters Afterlife? A little bit. I'll probably catch it when it's on streaming. I don't plan to go to a theater to see it. I have some minimal interest. I'm not like super hot for it. I'm not like, oh boy, I can't wait for Ghostbusters Afterlife, but it seems intriguing. I'll probably catch it when it comes out, like on Netflix or Amazon or something. Radical Bacon, you don't think AOC would run? Um, and you're out to Trekkie. It's been so long since I watched the Batgirl episodes from the Adam West. I'm not sure if I can tell you what my favorite one was. I remember, yeah, me for force president. Thank you very much. I I remember an episode, a Batgirl episode, where the trap was that the three of them were tied in a human knot. It was Batman, Robin, and Batgirl, and they were all sort of sitting Indian style across from each other, and their arms and legs were all tangled up, and they were tied in a human knot, and they had to untie themselves. And that was like, I don't think that was a cliffhanger. I think that was just like a mid-episode trap that they were in. Um, I remember that episode for some. I don't remember who the villain was. I don't remember what the resolution was. Um, but yeah. 255 AD says, why do you think most couples can't maintain a friendship after they break up, and why wasn't that an issue for you and Dana? Well, me and Dana were friends before we were a couple. So I think that was part of it. And also me and Dana did, like, we've known each other for over 20 years. But we weren't always in touch. Like, we did lose touch with each other for a while there in the middle. So it's not like we were friends all along, and not that we wouldn't have been. I mean, I think we have a pretty strong base, for a relationship, and I think we would always be close in some way. Um, but I think it helped that we were friends before we got involved, like romantically. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe part of it is the breakup itself is rough. And I know, like, after Dana and I broke up, we didn't really talk or see each other for a long time after that. But I think by the time we got back into touch with each other, the sort of the hurt and the negative feelings had gone away, and all that was left was the love and the friendship and the wanting to have contact with each other. And so you could focus on the positive part and not the negative part. And the negative part wasn't there anymore. So I think that was a big part of it. And unfortunately, I guess not everybody is capable of having it, or maybe not everybody wants that. There's a lot of people break up and they don't really want to be friends. It's not just that they can't, it's that for whatever reason, they're just not interested in maintaining a presence in each other's lives, which is fine. Like, that's completely valid. You know, that's a completely valid way of doing it too. Liam Foley asks, does the mere existence of Batman create the very villains he's trying to fight against? Yes, and in some cases, literally. I mean, like the classic origin of the Joker is, yes, Batman literally drops him into the vat of acid in the card factory. And I mean, not on purpose, but that's what happens. Like, he becomes the Joker as a direct result of his encounter with Batman. So in that case, yes. And in other cases, Batman has been indirectly responsible for the origins of villains as well. And that idea of, as it's addressed a little bit in the Nolan films, and in the comics from the 80s and 90s, to the idea of escalation, of the mere fact that Batman is there being Batman causes villains to up the ante. I think that is, yes, and I think that's a really interesting idea to explore in Batman stories. Does Batman actually make things worse? And are the ways in which Batman makes things better good enough to cancel out, or at least make it worth, the ways in which he makes things worse? I think that's a really rich vein of story potential for Batman. R2 Ando has a good one. When's the last time you woke up horrified you've pissed the bed? I cannot remember. It's been since I was a kid, but it used to happen fairly regularly. I used to have, if this hasn't happened for a really long time. I don't think it's ever happened as an adult, but if I went to bed and then maybe I'd had something to drink before bedtime, and in the middle of the night I had to get up and go to the bathroom, sometimes I would have a dream where in the dream I would have to take a piss. And sometimes in the dream, I would actually be taking a piss in the dream. And I would wake up in a panic thinking I was peeing in real life. And I wasn't. Like, I never had like a bedwetting problem as a kid, thank goodness. But there was always that moment of, oh my God, oh shit, oh, it was just a dream. And then I would get up and go to the bathroom. But I would have that panic of like, oh shit, that was my brain's really, really shitty way of waking me up and telling me you got to go to the bathroom. Kemp Chalmers with the super chat. As an adult, have you sharded? I don't think so. I don't think I ever have. Again, I'm very lucky on that score. I don't think I ever have. Kirak 2011 says, I dare ask, don't hate, where does George Clooney rate for you as Batman? I think he rates pretty much at the bottom, but it's not George Clooney's fault. I think with the right script and the right director, I think George Clooney could have been a fantastic Batman, whether you played the character straight or whether you did like, an Adam West 1960s comedic version. Either way, I think George Clooney could have been a terrific Batman. Or if you had split the difference and done like a 1940s or 50s sort of more lighthearted Silver Age adventure type story. Because, George Clooney could play like this kind of suave, sophisticated hero. And if they had done a version of Batman like that, I mean, I think in many different possible interpretations of the character, Clooney could have been terrific. But unfortunately, his one shot at the character was Batman and Robin, which was a an epically failed comedy is what Batman and Robin was. It was trying to do something like the Adam West Batman. Unfortunately, the Adam West Batman worked because the jokes were funny, and the jokes in Batman and Robin are fucking horrible and are not funny at all. Um, and Joel Schumacher apparently didn't know how to direct comedy anyway. Like he just the whole thing was just misbegotten from the jump. But so no, Clooney does not rank very highly for me as Batman at all. But it's not through no fault of his own. Kemp, no, I honestly don't remember ever having sharded as an adult. I seriously, I mean, I'm honestly don't. Hey, Sarah, good to see you. Yeah, Geraldo Trekkie, I'll give you that. I do think Batman and Robin is better than Batman v Superman. I agree with you. I agree with you. Um, and yeah, and you know what? As far as the nipples on the bat suit, that's one of those things. Honestly, if that was a good movie, I would not give a shit about that. I do not care. I mean, the whole thing is the gimmick of Batman in those movies is that the bat suit is like molded rubber body armor anyway. They give him abs, they give him pecs. I mean, if the suit has nipples on it, like honestly, I do not care. The problems I have with Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, the list is so long before it gets to nips on the batsuit. I could not give less of a shit about that. It doesn't bother me. I'm not uptight about it. I don't think it ruins anything. I don't think it's inherently a bad idea. It's a design choice. It is what it is. The problem with those movies is that they suck, and that makes it seem like when a movie is bad, it makes you question every choice, right? So Batman Forever, Batman and Robin are terrible movies. They are the product of multitudes of bad decisions. And you look at something like, and you think like, oh my God, and they put nipples on the bad suit. What the fuck were they thinking? If that was a great movie, I don't think there would be many people saying, oh my God, that was the best Batman movie ever. Too bad about the nipples, though. I don't think anybody would give a shit. Geraldo Trekkie. Now, this is interesting because other people have brought this up. Um, Add on to the Mikok and Tuvix question. Couldn't they use the transporter to duplicate Tuvix and then let one Tuvix do the splitting thing? Yes, but you're still killing a Tuvix. It doesn't really solve the ethical dilemma. You're doing both. You're keeping a Tuvix, but in order to bring back Tuvok and Neelix, you're also still killing a Tuvix. Both, if you make a transporter duplicate, you have two Tuvixes that both have an equal right to exist. So you're still killing a Tuvix to bring back Tuvok and Neelix. And then the problem, if anything, it makes the problem worse because then it's like, how do you choose which Tuvix you kill to bring back Tuvok and Neelix and which Tuvix gets to live? How do you make that decision? And however you may, even if you say, well, we'll just choose at random. Well, how is it fair to the one that dies? I said, no, that doesn't actually solve the problem at all. That actually makes it worse. See him back. Yeah, I'm glad I could help, buddy. I'm glad I could help. Tasby 12. I have, yeah, I have pretty much the opposite take. I wouldn't say I despise Batman Forever, but I just think it's a really bad movie. I actually rewatched it a few months ago just because I hadn't seen it for a while. And I thought, well, maybe I'm misremembering it, or maybe it'll be one of those times like It's a Wonderful Life where I'll watch it again and I'll be like, oh, actually, I didn't realize this is a good movie. I thought Batman Forever was terrible. I watched it it was this year. It was several months ago. It was awful. I thought it was absolutely awful. Maybe even worse than Batman and Robin. Like just lifeless and dull and dumb and just terrible. Batman Returns, on the other hand, I have developed a great appreciation for relatively recently. In the last 5 years or so, I would say I've developed a really great appreciation for Batman Returns. I think it is hilarious. I think if you look at Batman Returns as a comedy, and I think that's what it's supposed to be. I think if you watch Batman Returns and you view it from the perspective of this is a comedy, these are jokes, this is we're supposed to be thinking this is funny. Not funny in the same way as the Adam West show, certainly. It's not the same kind of humor, but it's definitely got a lot of jokes in it that people missed the first time around and that I missed the first 15 or 20 times around because I was just viewing it from the wrong mindset. I think Batman Returns is terrific. I don't know if I would go so far as to say it's great. And I certainly wouldn't rate it alongside, like, The Dark Knight as like one of the great Batman movies. But I think it's terrific. Super chat from Kurek 2011 says, I find Batman and Robin to be intentionally comedic as the Adam West Batman. Don't get me wrong, I love the serious nature of Keaton and Bale. No, I agree with you. I do think that's the intent. I do think Batman and Robin is aiming for that. I just don't think it's actually funny. I just don't think the jokes are good. I agree with you. I think it's trying to be funny. It's not accidentally that campy and that silly. And again, I think a lot of people misinterpreted it and thought that like it was just, this huge misfire because it was supposed to be a serious action movie. And how could you take it? I don't think you were meant to take it seriously. I think it was going for funny. I just don't think it is funny. I think the jokes in it are bad. I think it's a bad comedy. I think it's definitely supposed to be a comedy, but I think it's a bad comedy. Liam's with me. Yeah, Batman Returns is definitely a dark comedy. You're up to Trekkie says, so apparently we get NCIS Hawaii now, and apparently without a Magnum crossover. What would you think about NCIS Vulcan or NCIS Mars? I mean, I still wouldn't watch it, but that's it. They might as well say, "Hey, screw it. Let's just go all out with this," right? I mean, if they wanted to do NCIS Mars, I would. I mean, have they reached Fast and the Furious levels of absurdity with that franchise yet, where they've just stopped giving a shit and they're just like, let's just throw the goofiest shit we can think of at the wall? Yeah, Kirok 2011. Yes, Batman kills the Fat Man and smiles as he does. Yes, and that's supposed to be a joke. I think that's a joke. It's a sick joke, but I think it's definitely a joke. Yeah, Radical Bacon points out Year of Hell from Voyager was originally pitched as a season. And I think it would have worked better that way. I mean, I think if they had done Year of Hell as a season and still hit the reset button at the end, that would have been a big problem. But presumably they wouldn't have. If they would have carried it through the entire season, they wouldn't have just hit the reset button at the end. But that was one of the big problems with it, was that they rushed through all of this story and character development in 2 episodes, and then they hit the reset button and it all goes back to the way it was. It's really a microcosm of what made Voyager such an incredibly frustrating show. Geraldo Trekkie asks, did you watch the Deutschland trilogy, and when did you hear about the Berlin Wall coming down? I've never watched the Deutschland trilogy, so I don't know. But I heard about the Berlin Wall coming down when it happened. I was in school and we were talking about it, and I think I probably saw it on the news too. I think, 10 maybe when the Berlin Wall came down. And I grasped that it was really important. Like, I didn't completely understand all the geopolitical things that went into it, that led up to it, or that would follow from it. But I grasped that it was a big deal, that it was a long time coming, that it was something, it was, a symbol of something that had lasted, that had divided the country for decades, and now it was gone, and it was sort of a symbol of change and of hope, and of hopefully a better future coming to Germany. And yeah, thought it was a real big deal at the time. And I learned about it when it was happening. I remember it. Okay, so it's just about 8 o'clock. So I'm going to wrap this baby up. I'm going to go make some dinner for myself, I think. Before I go, I just want to thank everybody for hanging out with me and for your awesome questions. Remember to check out the charity links down in the description, charitylinks.page. Click that link and you'll go to a doc that is maintained by our buddy Some Random Geek, where you can find links to help out some friends of ours, including Joanna, who was mentioned earlier, who need some financial help. And we would really appreciate it if you would do that, if you're able to. Also, don't forget that if you are a fan of my work, you can support this channel by becoming a patron by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives, or by becoming a channel member by just clicking the join button. And either way, it helps me out tremendously. Even if you can only afford $1 a month, that really helps me out a lot and helps me continue to do this on a regular basis. And I could not do this without my patrons and my channel members. So thanks to all of you who are already patrons or members, and to all of you who are thinking about becoming a patron or a member, I thank you for your support as well. If you pledge $5 a month or more, either as a patron or as a member, you get a shout out at the end of a Trek Actually video. But if you are a patron or a member at any level, one of the benefits you get is that you can submit questions ahead of time for these Ask Away live streams. And as you see at the beginning of the show, I answer questions from patrons and members first thing. And then I turn to the live chat. So there you go. Also, don't forget, in addition to the YouTube stuff, I am a co-host of a couple of podcasts as a part of the Let Me Listen family of podcasts. There is Late Seating, the movie review podcast that I co-host alongside the great Jason Harding, where we take a fresh look at classic films and decide if they deserve whatever reputation they have, whether it's good or bad. Our most recent episode is our review of the classic landmark silent film, The Battleship Potemkin. And this weekend, we'll be recording our next episode, which will be our review of Blade Runner. That'll be up next Friday, so watch for that. Also, I am a co-star of the Star Trek themed comedy podcast, The Ensign's Log, alongside Jason and also the brilliant and wonderful Dana Cole, who is in the live chat with us as usual. Jason, Dana, and I play characters who are low-ranking officers serving aboard the TNG era Starship Enterprise, and we have our own original stories that are happening sort of parallel to the events of Star Trek The Next Generation. It's a ton of fun. We're in our 4th season now, our first season aboard the TNG era Enterprise, and the show is really in a groove. It's been really fun and really funny this year, and I'm so proud of it and so happy with how it's turned out. We had a new episode just go up today. So if you have not been listening to the Ensign's Log, it's a great time to jump on and listen to the Ensign's Log. If you're worried about jumping in a few years into it, the beginning of the 4th season, our current season, is a great place to start. But honestly, I think it's a pretty accessible show. And if you want to dive in, I think you can dive in pretty much anywhere and get the gist of it. But anyway, it's letmelistenpodcasts.com, or links in the description to check out the Ensign's Log and Late Seating. And I really hope you do. That's it for me, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the support. Thank you for everything. Have a good night. Have a good weekend. And I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.